Hollow Creek was a town suspended in perpetual twilight, where the sun fought through dense canopies of ancient pines but never quite broke free. The town seemed swallowed by the forest, its weathered wooden houses leaning like tired old souls and streets cracked and overgrown with moss. To outsiders, Hollow Creek was just a forgotten speck on the map, an echo of a place, barely more than a name whispered among legends. But to those who had roots tangled in the soil and stories of the creek's dark waters, it was a living thing, breathing shadows and secrets. Elena Rhodes drove through the winding roads leading into Hollow Creek under a low-hanging sky that pressed down like a heavy cloak. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and decaying leaves, an aroma that felt ancient and unsettling. As the gravel crunched beneath her tires, she noticed the absence of the usual noises that accompanied rural towns. No children laughing in yards, no distant dogs barking, not even a hum of electricity or a flicker of neon signs. It was as if the town was holding its breath. She had come here chasing a story, sent by her editor to uncover forgotten pockets of America where time and history tangle with myth. Hollow Creek was her latest assignment, but it felt personal, more than just a feature. Clutched in her hand was an old, brittle map, its edges stained and torn. The map had belonged to her grandfather, a man who had vanished without explanation decades ago, leaving behind fragments of stories about Hollow Creek, its cursed creek, and the strange disappearances that dotted the town's history. Elena's footsteps echoed against the cracked pavement as she approached the main street, where a single gas lamp sputtered weakly, casting flickering shadows. The few townsfolk she passed looked at her with wary eyes, their faces weathered and guarded. They spoke little, their voices low and broken by old mountain accents. One elderly man muttered under his breath, "You shouldn't be here after dark," before shuffling away into the mist. The creek itself was said to run cold as death, its waters dark and deep, never freezing even in the harshest winters. The locals whispered that the creek carried voices, faint, sorrowful whispers of those who had vanished, calling out to be heard. On moonless nights, the whispers were said to grow louder, curling around the trees like smoke, winding into the town's bones. Elena wasn't sure she believed in curses or ghosts, but as twilight bled into night and the fog thickened, she felt a growing unease. The shadows lengthened, and the whispers she thought were carried on the wind began to feel like they were beneath her skin, soft voices threading through the air just beyond comprehension. Her grandfather's map pointed her toward the old Hollow Creek Cemetery, a place long abandoned, where the markers leaned crooked and the names faded like memories. She was drawn to it like a moth to flame, feeling a pull that tugged at her heart and mind. As the first stars pierced the veil of dusk, Elena heard it, soft, distant, a whispering from the creek itself, a voice that seemed to call her name. Her breath caught, and the line between reality and the unknown blurred. Tonight, the creek would not only whisper, it would speak. The night wrapped around Hollow Creek like a suffocating shroud, heavy and unyielding. Elena stood near the edge of the old cemetery, where gnarled trees twisted over crooked headstones, their branches clawing at the starless sky. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth and rotting leaves, a smell so pungent it seemed to seep into her very bones. Her flashlight's beam trembled as she swept it across the cracked stones, illuminating names worn nearly smooth by decades of wind and rain. She crouched beside one of the larger monuments, a granite slab etched with delicate floral patterns, barely legible now. The name, Margaret Holloway, stared back at her. Beneath it, dates faded into obscurity. Her fingers traced the cold stone, and for a fleeting moment, she felt a pulse, a heartbeat, faint but unmistakable, as if the stone itself held a secret beneath its surface. The whispers began then, like a thread unraveling from the fabric of silence. At first, they were indistinct murmurs, soft as the rustling leaves. Then the voices grew clearer, fragments of words brushing the edges of her mind. "Help me? Don't forget." Beneath the water, Elena's heart hammered, but curiosity pushed her forward. She scanned the ground, noticing a patch where the moss had been disturbed, as if something had been recently unearthed or buried in haste. Kneeling, she dug her fingers into the cool earth, the soil giving way easily beneath her touch. Her hands brushed against something smooth and cold, metal. She pulled out a small, tarnished locket, its surface etched with intricate patterns she didn't recognize. The moment she held it, a shiver raced down her spine, and the whispers swelled into a chorus, urgent and desperate. Her flashlight flickered, and in the wavering light, Elena thought she saw movement. Shadows flitting just beyond the tree line. Too quick to be human. The night around her deepened, the fog thickening into a dense wall of gray that swallowed sound and light alike. A voice, clear and cold, whispered directly into her ear. "Return or join us." Elena spun around, but the graveyard was empty. The only response was a relentless murmur of the creek flowing nearby, dark, endless, and alive. Fear tangled with determination. She slipped a locket into her jacket pocket and rose slowly. There was something tied to that trinket, a history buried beneath Hollow Creek's surface, and she was now entangled in its web. As she made her way back through the fog, the whispers followed, threading into her thoughts, pulling her deeper into a mystery that refused to stay buried. Tonight, the past would rise, and with it, the creek's true nature. The walk back to her rented cabin felt unervingly long, the fog twisting like living fingers around the narrow path, muffling the usual night sounds and replacing them with eerie silence. The only noise was a steady drip of condensation from the pine needles overhead, and the distant murmur of Hollow Creek itself, winding unseen beneath the blanket of mist. Elena's mind raced. The locket burned a dull ache in her pocket, its cold metal somehow heavier than it should be, as if it carried the weight of something far beyond its small size. She kept glancing over her shoulder, every shadow twisting into shapes that vanished when she blinked. Inside the cabin, the air was stale and cold. She flicked on the old heater, the sputtering noise breaking the oppressive quiet, but doing little to chase away the chill that clung to her skin. On the small wooden table sat the map, creased and fragile, as if it were an ancient relic instead of a scrap of paper. Her grandfather's handwriting still fresh despite the years. Find the source. Beware the depths. She pulled out the locket, examining it under the dim light. The pattern etched into its surface was a spiral, almost hypnotic, its grooves worn smooth by time or use. As her fingers traced the spiral, the whispers returned, not from outside, but inside her mind, soft and insistent. Beneath. Her pulse quickened. The creek was more than a simple stream. It was a gateway, a trap, or a prison. The story she dismissed as folklore suddenly took shape in her mind. Disappearances, strange lights over the water, voices calling in the night. The town silence was not peace. It was fear. Suddenly, a sharp knock at the door shattered the quiet. Elena jumped, heart leaping into her throat. She approached cautiously and opened it to find an elderly woman, stooped and wrapped in layers of threadbare shawls, her eyes reflecting years of sorrow and warning. "You shouldn't be here after dark," the woman rasped, her voice like dry leaves scraping across stone. "The creek takes what's owed, and it's hungry tonight." Elena swallowed her fear and asked, "What do you mean?" "What does the creek want?" The woman's gaze pierced hers, dark and unyielding. "The locket. It belongs to those who drown beneath the surface. The spiral never ends until the debt is paid. If you want to survive Hollow Creek, you must return it, or become part of the whispering." Before Elena could respond, the woman turned and disappeared into the fog, leaving behind only the echo of her warning. Elena closed the door and leaned against it, the cold seeping through the wood. The night was alive, the whispers growing louder, the spiral tightening around her. The creek was watching, and it wanted its own. Sleep was elusive. The cabin seemed to breathe with the rhythm of the creek outside, an unsettling, almost sentient pulse that seeped through the walls and rattled Elena's bones. The whispers returned with the night's deepening shadows, echoing faintly in the corners of her mind when she closed her eyes. They were no longer mere fragments, but clearer, weaving a dark tapestry of voices from the past, entreating, pleading, sometimes threatening. She sat by the window, watching as the fog rolled over the treetops, swallowing the silhouette of Hollow Creek's skeletal rooftops. The moon was a pale ghost behind the swirling mist, casting an eerie glow on the twisted branches that scratched against the glass. Her thoughts swirled with the old woman's warning and the weight of the locket in her pocket. Returning, it was a choice fraught with unknowns. What did returning even mean? To whom? And why had her grandfather vanished after seeking answers here? The silence was suddenly shattered by a distant, mournful sound, a low, haunting melody rising from the direction of the creek. It was a song not meant for the living. A dirge carried on the night wind, twisting the air with its sorrowful cadence. The melody tugged at Elena's soul, awakening something primordial inside her, a fear that was both ancient and intimately personal. Unable to resist, she grabbed her coat and stepped into the night. The fog wrapped around her like cold silk, the ground squelching beneath her boots as she made her way toward the creek. The path was nearly lost beneath the creeping moss and undergrowth, but the song guided her like a beacon through the oppressive darkness. As she neared the water's edge, the creek was no longer a gentle stream, but a wide, black mirror reflecting the abyss above. The whispers escalated, circling her like unseen hands brushing her skin, and the locket spiral seemed to pulse in rhythm with the water. A sudden splash broke the surface, ripples expanding outward, distorting the reflected stars. From the depths rose a figure, draped in water and shadow, its face obscure but unmistakably human, eyes glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. It reached toward her with slow, deliberate movements. Elena stumbled back, heart hammering, but a strange calm washed over her. The voice she heard was no longer threatening, but desperate. Return what was taken, and the spiral. The figure began to dissolve back into the creek, leaving behind a chilling silence and a single message burning into Elena's mind. You are the dead. She stood frozen, realizing the true horror of Hollow Creek was not in the water or the whispers, but in her own blood, woven deep into the town's cursed spiral. The weight of the revelation crushed Elena with a slow, suffocating pressure. You are the dead. The words echoed relentlessly in her mind as she staggered back from the creek's edge, the water's cold mist clinging to her skin like icy fingers. Her breath came shallow and fast, heart pounding in sync with the ceaseless ripple of the dark water. That figure, whatever it had been, was no mere hallucination or shadow play. It was a summons, a warning that the curse of Hollow Creek was inextricably entwined with her very bloodline. Her grandfather's disappearance suddenly made tragic sense. He hadn't vanished randomly. He'd been pulled into the spiral, bound by the ancient debts that the town's creek demanded. As the moon disappeared behind a thick wall of fog, Elena's mind raced to piece together the fragment of history she'd uncovered so far. The locket, its spiral emblem worn smooth, was clearly more than a family heirloom. It was a key, a token of a pact made long ago, a pact she was now forced to confront. The cold seeped into her bones, but resolve hardened her features. She wouldn't be another whisper lost in the creek's endless song. Her eyes caught the faint glow of her phone, its screen lighting up with a new message. No sender, no words, just a photo, an old black and white image of a family gathering at the creek's edge. The faces were blurred, but at the center stood a man who bore an unmistakable resemblance to her grandfather. Beneath the photo, scrawled in spidery handwriting, was a single line. The spiral binds us all. Find the heart, break the chain. Elena's breath caught. The heart of the spiral. What was it? Where was it hidden? The fog thickened, the night growing heavier with unseen eyes and whispered threats. She had no choice but to delve deeper into the town's secrets, into places long forgotten and stories long buried. Her footsteps quickened, determination fueling her as she headed toward the town library, the one place that might hold the answers she needed. Somewhere in the dusty archives, between yellow pages and fragile records, lay the truth about the spiral, the debt, and the fate that awaited her. Behind her, the creek murmured, patient and eternal, waiting. The town library stood like a fortress of memories, its aging brick walls muffling the world's pressing silence. Elena pushed open a heavy oak door, the hinges groaning in protest as she entered. Inside, the scent of mildew, dust, and old paper wrapped around her like a shroud. Rows of towering shelves stretched into shadowy recesses, their contents long forgotten by the outside world. A single, flickering fluorescent light overhead hummed as she made her way to the historical archives, a cramped room at the back of the library. She pulled on a pair of worn gloves and carefully sifted through brittle newspapers, town records, and faded photographs. Hours passed unnoticed as she pieced together the chilling mosaic of Hollow Creek's past. Decades of disappearances were recorded, each case eerily similar. Residents vanishing without a trace. Last seen near the creek's edge, their belongings found tangled in the reeds or submerged beneath the water surface. Some spoke of strange lights hovering over the creek at night. Others whispered of voices calling out from the depths, pleading for release. Among the documents, Elena discovered a yellow journal. Its leather cover cracked and the pages filled with the delicate handwriting of a woman named Abigail Holloway, a name matching several grave markers in the cemetery. The entries detailed a horrifying secret passed down through generations. A dark covenant forged to protect the town from an ancient force lurking beneath the creek. Abigail's final entry sent a chill crawling down Elena's spine. The spiral calls, and it demands a sacrifice. The debt must be paid in blood and soul. Only by returning the token to its origin can the cycle be broken. But beware, for the heart of the spiral is guarded by shadows that hunger for the living. Elena's fingers trembled as she closed the journal. The spiral, her grandfather's locket, was both key and curse. The heart of the spiral remained a mystery, but the warnings were clear. Outside, the fog thickened, curling against the library's windows like restless hands. Somewhere beyond the walls, the creek whispered, its song rising with the night. Elena knew the next step was dangerous, but she had no choice. She had to find the heart. Elena left the library with the journal tucked securely in her bag, her mind awash with the weight of Abigail Holloway's words. The night had deepened into an oppressive blackness, the fog rolling thicker now, swallowing street lamps and distorting familiar shapes into sinister phantoms. Each step back to her cabin was heavy, as if the very air resisted her passage. Her breath steamed in the chill, and the creek's distant murmur seemed to grow louder, louder than before, as if it had grown impatient. She couldn't shake the feeling that unseen eyes tracked her, watching from the shrouded edges of the woods. Her heartbeat quickened with every snap of twig and rustle of leaf. The journal had mentioned the heart of the spiral. But what was it? A place? An object? Something else entirely? Elena knew she needed answers, and quickly, the spiral's pull was growing stronger. She could feel it tugging at her, threatening to drag her under. As she rounded a bend, a sudden movement in the mist caught her eye. A figure stood just beyond the tree line, indistinct but unmistakably human-shaped. The silhouette flickered in and out of focus like a candle's flame, and for a moment, Elena thought she recognized the face, a young woman with sorrowful eyes. "Help us," the figure whispered, voice like wind through dead leaves. Elena froze, breath hitching. The apparition stretched out a hand, pale and trembling, beckoning her closer. Despite the terror prickling her skin, she stepped forward. "Who are you?" Elena asked, voice barely more than a breath. The figure's eyes filled with unbearable sadness. "We are the lost, bound to the creek's curse, trapped in the spiral. Only the token can set us free." Suddenly, the ground beneath Elena's feet shifted. The fog swirled violently, obscuring the figure as chilling laughter echoed all around her, a sound both childlike and cruel. "You belong to us now," the voice whispered from the darkness. Elena stumbled back, heart pounding as the shadows closed in. Her grandfather's locket throbbed fiercely against her chest, its spiral glowing faintly under her shirt. She had to act. The spiral was tightening, and if she failed, she would join the countless voices lost to Hollow Creek's endless song. Panic surged like wildfire as Elena bolted through the thickening fog, branches clawing at her arms and face as if the force itself sought to claim her. The laughter echoed behind her, shifting and distorting, a chorus of taunts and pleas that tore at her sanity. Her lungs burned, feet slipping in the wet undergrowth, but the desperate need to escape outweighed every ache and fear. The locket throbbed steadily against her chest, its faint spiral glow pulsing in rhythm with her racing heartbeat. She clutched it tightly, the cold metal grounding her amidst the chaos of the creeping shadows. Her grandfather's journal pressed against her side, pages fluttering open to a hastily scrawled note. "The heart lies beneath the creek's darkest bend. Return the token." In the spiral, her mind flashed back to the creek, its black water swirling beneath twisted branches, reflecting nothing but an abyss. She had to reach it. Pushing through the final tangle of trees, Elena burst onto the bank of the creek's bend. The water was unervingly still, the surface like liquid glass marred only by a faint ripple that seemed to beckon her closer. The whispers rose again, urgent now, a tide of voices weaving through the night air. With trembling hands, she knelt at the water's edge and opened the locket. The spiral inside seemed to shimmer, emitting a soft blue light that illuminated the creek's dark depths. Summoning every ounce of courage, Elena extended the locket over the water. The creek seemed to respond, the surface rippling and glowing, revealing submerged stone altar etched with the same spiral pattern. A sudden chill gripped her spine as shadows coalesced beneath the water, forming anguished faces twisted in eternal torment. Their eyes pleaded, voices echoing inside her mind. Release us, break the chain, and the spiral. Elena's fingers trembled but held steady. She lowered the locket toward the altar. As it touched the ancient stone, the creek erupted in a burst of blue light, washing over her in waves of warmth and despair. The shadows writhed, their anguished cries rising to a crescendo before dissolving into silence. The spiral had been broken, but as the light faded, Elena realized she was not alone. Behind her, the fog swirled once more, and from it emerged a figure, tall and impossibly dark. Its eyes glowed with cruel light. "Your debt is not paid," it hissed, voice like grinding stone. The creek's whispers had ceased, but a new nightmare had begun. The dark figure loomed like a shadow stretched too thin across the edge of reality, its eyes twin coals burning with a merciless hunger. Elena's breath caught, the warmth from the dissipating light flickering like a candle in a storm. The creek's surface stilled once more, reflecting nothing but the cold night sky. Elena started, voice trembling as the weight of the entity pressed down. "I returned the token. I ended the spiral." The thing's grin was a jagged crack in the darkness, teeth like splinters gleaming. "The spiral was never meant to be broken by the living. Your bloodline is bound to the curse. You carry the debt in your veins. Sacrifice was only ever delayed." Elena's heart hammered against her ribs like a desperate drum. Her grandfather's fate, the disappearances, the whispers, all pointed to this. The curse was a cycle designed to claim one from the family line, a sacrifice passed down through generations. The figure stepped forward, the air chilling with its approach. "You cannot run. The creek remembers. It waits, and now it waits for you." Desperation ignited in Elena's chest. She grabbed the locket, now dim, and shouted into the night, "I won't be your pawn." The entity's laughter was a sound of grinding stone and rusted chains. It lunged, a blur of shadows and cold that snatched at her throat. Elena stumbled backward, gasping, and the world seemed to tilt. Suddenly, a sharp crack split the night, the sound of a rifle shot ringing through fog. The figure recoiled, shrieking and dissipated like smoke caught on the wind. Elena collapsed to the ground, coughing and shaking. As a figure emerged from the trees, a tall man, eyes fierce and steady, rifle lower but ready. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said, voice low but firm. "The creek doesn't let go easy." Trembling, Elena looked up at him. Who are you?" "Name's James. I've lived here all my life, and I've been waiting for someone like you." The creek's whispers faded behind them, but the night was far from over. Elena knew that the fight to break the curse, and her own survival, had only just begun. James guided Elena through the thickening fog with a steady hand, his rifle slung casually over his shoulder. His voice was low and steady, a grounding force amid the chaos that had swallowed her whole. "The creek's curse isn't just stories," he said. "It's a cycle older than this town. Every few decades, it claims someone from the Holloway line. Your family, your grandfather was the last." Elena swallowed hard, feeling the cold dread settle in her chest. "Why me? Why now?" James shook his head. "Because you found the locket, the token. It's the tether that holds the curse in place. Returning it to the altar was only the first step. You need to finish what he started." They reached a small clearing where the fog seemed to thin, revealing the skeletal remains of an old cabin, long abandoned but eerily preserved. "This was your grandfather's place," James explained. "He left notes, clues to break the spiral." Inside the cabin, Elena found weathered journals and cryptic drawings, spirals, symbols intertwined with images of the creek and shadowy figures. As she read, a horrifying truth emerged. The spiral was a prison, binding restless spirits trapped by a malevolent force lurking beneath the water. To break the curse, someone had to willingly enter the spiral's heart and confront the darkness within. James's eyes met hers, steady but haunted. It's a choice. You can try to escape, but the creek will hunt you, or you can face it, end it. The weight of the decision crushed her. Every instinct screamed to run, to flee this cursed town forever. But the whispers had become a part of her, threading through her thoughts, pulling her toward the creek's dark heart. Outside, the night was alive with unseen eyes and whispered threats. The spiral's end was within reach, but it demanded a sacrifice unlike any before. Elena took a deep breath, steeling herself for the journey into the darkness, because some debts could only be paid in blood. Elena's hands trembled as she packed a small bag with essentials: water, a flashlight, the journals, and of course, the locket. The cabin's worn wooden floor creaked beneath her boots, each sound amplified by the eerie silence that hung like a veil. James watched her closely, his expression grave but resolute. "Once you enter the spiral's heart," he said, "there's no turning back. The darkness tests you, your fears, your regrets. It feeds on what you carry inside." She swallowed hard, memories of her childhood, her grandfather's absence, the whispered warnings from her family, the late nights spent reading his old letters, surged forward. All of it was leading to this moment. Outside, the creek gurgled quietly, its surface deceptively calm beneath the pale moonlight. Elena could feel the weight of countless eyes upon her, those lost souls trapped between worlds, hoping for release. James handed her a weathered amulet, a small charm etched with the same spiral motif. "This will protect you, only just enough. Trust your instincts." Elena nodded, steeling her nerves. The path to the creek's bend was steep and treacherous, overgrown with brambles and slickwood moss. As she neared the water's edge, the air grew colder and the whispers intensified, no longer distant but surrounding her, pressing into her skin like 1,000 icy fingers. Taking a deep breath, she stepped onto the submerged altar, the locket pulsed in her hand, and the water around her began to glow with a pale, spectral light. The spiral pattern beneath the surface spiraled downward, an abyssal tunnel winding into darkness. With a final glance back at the world she knew, Elena plunged beneath the water. Cold seized her instantly, biting through her clothes and skin. The darkness was complete, a suffocating void that swallowed sound and light alike. Yet, within that void, faint glimmers of light swirled like distant stars, guiding her deeper into the spiral's heart. Voices called to her, some pleading, some warning, but Elena pressed forward, her resolve unbroken. Inside the spiral, the true battle was only beginning. Elena felt as though she were drifting through a dream, or perhaps a nightmare conjured from the depths of the human soul. The water around her shimmered with an otherworldly glow, faint blue tendrils curling and twisting like serpents through the black void. Time lost all meaning. Minutes bled into hours, or maybe she was moving through eternity itself. The spiral beneath her feet seemed infinite, a winding staircase descending into a place no light had ever touched. Her lungs burned with every breath, but the weight of the lock in her hand was accompanying anchor, a promise of purpose amid the encroaching darkness. Suddenly, shapes emerged in the gloom. Shadows shaped like people, faces contorted with pain and longing. They reached toward her with translucent hands, their eyes hollow and sorrowful. They whispered her name, their voices a blend of hope and despair. "You carry the debt. Break the spiral. Free us." Elena's heart ached with their sorrow, but a darker presence lurked beneath these tortured souls. From the depths rose a towering figure, an ancient thing woven from shadow and water, its eyes burning with cruel intelligence. It was the curse incarnate, the malevolent force that had held Hollow Creek in its grip for centuries. "You think you can undo what has lasted generations?" It hissed, voice like grinding stones. "Your bloodline is bound to me. You are mine." Elena felt tendrils of cold reach for her, attempting to drag her into the abyss. She tightened her grip on the locket, its spiral glowing brighter than ever, pushing back against the darkness. "I choose my fate," she whispered, voice steady despite the fear. "I will end this." A battle of wills erupted. Light against shadow, hope against despair. The locket's glow pulsed wildly, sending ripples through the void, and the spirits around her began to sing, a rising chorus of release and defiance. With a final surge, Elena thrust the locket into the heart of the spiral, a glowing cavity that seemed to pulse with life itself. The darkness screamed and shattered like glass, fragments of shadow scattering into nothingness. As the spiral dissolved, Elena felt herself lifted, weightless and free, the tortured voices finally at peace. She broke the surface of the creek with a gasp, the dawn light filtering through the thinning fog. Hollow Creek was still, silent in a way it hadn't been for centuries. The spiral was broken, but Elena knew the cost had been greater than she could see. Elena collapsed onto the creek's muddy bank, her lungs burning with every desperate gasp for air. The dawn's pale light filtered through the thinning fog, casting long, golden rays over the dark, still waters. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, the whispers had ceased, replaced by an almost sacred silence. But peace did not come easily to Hollow Creek, or to those bound by its curse. As she lay trembling, the weight of exhaustion heavy in her limbs, a shadow detached itself from the tree line. James emerged, his eyes scanning her face with relief and a cautious hope. "You made it," he said softly, kneeling beside her. "The spiral's broken. The creek's hunger has ended." Elena tried to smile, but found only trembling lips. "Is it really over?" she whispered. James nodded, though the shadows in his eyes hinted at a past filled with loss. "For now, the town will heal, but the scars will remain. You freed the spirits trapped beneath the water, the lost souls who've been waiting for release for generations." She thought of the faces in the spiral, their eyes pleading for salvation, the weight of their sacrifice pressed on her heart. "What happens to me?" she asked, voice barely audible. James placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "You're free to leave, but Hollow Creek will always be a part of you. You carry the mark of the spiral now, a reminder of the debt you paid." The locket lay shattered in the mud, its spiral pattern broken. Yet Elena could still feel its pulse beneath her skin, a faint thrum of connection, a bond to a story that stretched beyond her own. As the first bird began to sing, Elena stood, the creek's cold water dripping from her clothes. She looked back once more, the town bathed in fragile light, the darkness receding with the promise of dawn. Hollow Creek had whispered its final secret, and now it could finally rest. But Elena knew that some debts are never truly paid. They only change hands. Days passed like a blur after that morning at the creek, each one carrying Elena further away from Hollow Creek, yet never truly freeing her from its lingering grasp. She left the town behind, its secrets and shadows tucked away in the corners of her mind. But the echoes of the spiral's curse haunted her nights and dreams. Back in the city, the world felt foreign, too loud, too bright, and too fast. Elena found herself restless, unable to shake the feeling that something was missing, or worse, waiting. Her dreams were filled with whispers, soft, insistent calls that wove through the darkness, pulling her back to the creek. Faces appeared in the fog of her sleep. The lost souls she had freed, their eyes now calm, but filled with gratitude and sadness. They reached for her, not in menace, but as if seeking comfort, a final goodbye. One night, as the city's lights flickered beyond her window, Elena woke to find a small sprig of pine on her bedside table, fresh, damp, and unmistakably from the forest of Hollow Creek. Her heart thundered as the realization settled. The town's story was not finished with her. The spiral's mark was not just a memory or a burden. It was a bond, a tether that would forever tie her to the darkness and light of Hollow Creek. Determined, Elena began to write her story. The town's story, the curse and the courage it demanded. She poured herself into the pages, hoping to unravel the mystery further, to warn others who might hear the whispers in the dark. But deep within her soul, she knew the truth. The spiral song was eternal, and though the creek was silent now, the shadows beneath it were waiting for the next debt to be claimed. Months later, Elena returned to Hollow Creek, not as a frightened outsider, but as a woman bound by purpose and haunted by the past. The town had changed subtly in her absence. The oppressive fog had lifted, and the streets seemed less empty, the air lighter but still tinged with undeniable unease. She walked slowly toward the creek's edge, the locket's broken fragments tucked safely in her pack. The water was calm, shimmering under the midday sun, concealing the depths where ancient shadows once stirred. Elena knelt by the bank, pressing her palm to the cold stone altar beneath the surface, feeling the faint pulse of the spiral's echo, remnants of cycle broken but never fully erased. As the breeze stirred the pine needles overhead, a whisper brushed against her ear, a soft, familiar voice that was neither threat nor plea, but a solemn promise. Thank you. Elena closed her eyes, the weight of generations lifting. If only for a moment. She knew the spiral's darkness would always linger, an eternal thread woven into the fabric of Hollow Creek. But so too did the light of those brave enough to face it. The town's shadows had receded, but the story lived on in whispers and hearts and the courage of those who dared to listen. Elena stood, the first true smile breaking across her face since arriving in Hollow Creek. She was no longer just a keeper of secrets, but a guardian of its fragile peace. The spiral had ended, but the echoes beneath Hollow Creek would sing forever.